In the early 1920s, one invention would signal the start of the modern era and the dissemination of information around the world. For the first time, the events of history could be reported as they happened to almost anywhere on Earth. While this invention had been around since just past the turn of the century, it was during the Roaring Twenties that it began to change the world. That historic invention was radio. Welcome, fellow YouTubers. The Roaring Twenties radio channel brings you another video on early radio. I would greatly appreciate it if you would hit the subscribe button if you're not a subscriber already. Hello, everyone. This is the story of Ralph Oliver Williams Jr., who was the foremost authority on the 1920s largest radio company. That company was the Atwater Kent Radio Company, and its founder was Arthur Atwater Kent. I had the pleasure of traveling to Orient, New York recently to interview the stepson of Ralph Williams, Greg Bristow. Let me give you some background on Ralph Williams first. Then you'll get the chance to meet Greg and hear him tell more of the Ralph Williams story and what became of Ralph's museum. Ralph Williams was born on November 27, 1920 in the Bronx borough of New York City. His parents were Ralph Sr. and Bessie McGee Williams. The Williams moved to Keansburg, New Jersey, where Ralph Jr. grew up. Ralph would join the military in World War II and become a radar officer. After the war, Williams attended Northwestern University and graduated with a degree in engineering. Later, he would further his education by obtaining a master's degree. Ralph Williams would have a long career at General Electric. Early on at GE, Williams worked on broadcasting equipment, and later he would end up working in missile guidance systems. The road of life would lead Williams to a woman named Elinor Latham, and they would fall in love and get married. She would take an interest in Ralph's hobby and would support him in his radio-related endeavors. At age 38, Williams took an interest in collecting radios. His favorite radios were made by the Atwater Kent Radio Company. He would eventually have the largest collection of Atwater Kent radios in the world, while also becoming a leading expert on radios and histories of the Atwater Kent Radio Company and its founder, Arthur Atwater Kent. Ralph Williams' book, A. Atwater Kent, The Man, the Manufacturer, and His Radios, is a must-have for any serious Atwater Kent collectors. In 1979, Ralph and Elinor Williams purchased the historic Terry Mulford House in Orient, New York, near the eastern end of Long Island. The 7,000 square foot house is a designated historical landmark built around 1650. It was one of 7 houses that Queen Anne of England ordered built, and the only one left of the 7. Ironically, the purchase by Ralph and Elinor returned ownership of the home to the original owner's family, the ancestors of Elinor Latham Williams. After Ralph Williams retired, he founded the Voice of the Twenties Radio Museum. Located inside the Terry Mulford House, the museum has 470 radios, 220 of which were Atwater Kent, and the remaining radio sets were of various brands. The museum also had many other items like speakers, tubes, amplifiers, and much more. Ralph Oliver Williams died in 2002 at the age of 81. Elinor passed in 2018 at the age of 97. There's much more to the story of Ralph Williams and his wife Elinor. Let's meet Elinor's son, Greg Bristow, and listen to him give a first-hand account of life in the Williams family and what happened to the Terry Mulford House and the Voice of the Twenties Radio Museum since the passing of his stepfather, Ralph Williams, and his mother, Elinor. All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm Dan Dames, and you're watching the Roaring Twenties Radio YouTube channel. And I'm here in Orient, New York, with Greg Bristow, the stepson of Ralph Williams, the famous collector of Atwater Kent radios and author of several books on those radios. Probably America's foremost expert on Atwater Kent radios in recent history. So, Greg, thanks for inviting me here.
Well, you're most welcome. I'm glad to have you here.
Well,
I'm sorry.
Why did you buy you
the house?
Inherited the house.
Okay, the house was originally in my mother's family, and at the turn of the century, 1920, It was purchased by a doctor that was out of the family, and he owned it until 1979, or his family owned it until 1979 when we purchased it, and it came back into the family at that point. My mom's grandmother lived here, and much of her family in the years previous to that, back as far as the early 1700s.
What was their name, the family name?
Both Mulford, Terry, and Latham
Was the family names?
were the family names, yes.
Okay. Okay, so Ralph started this museum. Tell us the story there.
The radio museum was kind of an offshoot of buying the house, because the house was a historic property for other purposes, just in itself as a historic house. But it had a ballroom, which the Heath family, the family that owned it between 1920 and 1979, added to the house and built a ballroom, which we really had no use for. It was this great big room, but Ralph decided that since he had a collection of Atwater Kents and other radios, it would make a great museum. And as it turned out, he had a lot more than the 7 radios we knew as his collection in King of Prussia when we lived there in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. And he started filling it up with all the radios he had and could gather, and we ended up with 870 plus radios that the museum consisted of. Wow. in its heyday.
So what drew Ralph to those radios in particular? Why Atwater Kent?
Well, Atwater Kent was always an interest to him because we lived in Pennsylvania, and Atwater Kent was a Pennsylvania, Philadelphia corporation, and he had an extensive source of information for them, and it was just a good. I think Atwater Kent was such a major part of the development of radio, and we were in the right place at the right time to collect information and radios for that collection. We even got to know some of the family of Atwater Kent as the years went by, and ended up with all the radios we had.
So, who were some of the members of the Atwater Kent family you got to know?
We got to know Peter Kent, who was the grandson of Atwater. Mm-hmm. We also got involved when they disassembled the Atwater Kent factory, and it actually crossed the major highway there, the major road, mm-hmm. and was on both sides of the road. And one of the remaining buildings was known to have a cornerstone. And so when they disassembled those buildings, they contacted Ralph and asked him if he was interested in being involved in the opening of this cornerstone to see what would possibly archive there of Atwater Kent. And we got involved and actually desoldered the copper box that this cornerstone held.
Oh, time capsule, okay.
And it was a time capsule, and there was a radio in there, and there was some other papers and newspapers and a lot of stuff, and we even had the local television station there for the grand opening, and it was quite an event. But Ralph was just, thrilled to death to be part of that.
Sure.
And he and I both went to Atwater Kent's estate, where we got to go into the basement where he did a lot of his development, his private development of this and that, for all the things he did develop.
So, how old were you when you got interested in radios?
I guess about 35.
Okay. Now, your mother Ralph was her second husband,
Correct.
Ralph Williams. Okay. And he's the one that kind of got you interested in radios. You saw his collection and you kind of got into it that way.
He introduced me to radios. He introduced me to the radio collection, and that these were the basic radios, and how they started off with very simple crystal sets, which I was aware of as a child. I had the crystal set you hook to the telephone with a little earpiece, and you could tune it into the local AM station. And he talked to me about the total development, which I didn't understand a whole lot of, but it was interesting. And then when he came here and expanded his museum, I took an interest in that. There was just such an extensive growth of supply of the witnessing of growth of Atwater Kent, and it was very. I found it very interesting, and I just stayed interested in it.
Well, they were the biggest manufacturer of radios in the 1920s.
Yes.
So Ralph built this museum over many years, starting in his basement in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. Came here, grew some more here, you working with him. And then what year did Ralph pass away?
2002.
2002, 22 years ago. And now after he passed away, what happened with the house and the buildings here?
The house being a museum of radios and also a museum of the old house that is attached here, which is a 1666 post and girt home, and that was then expanded as time went on, became the farmhouse of the farm that my family, my cousins, still farm, that have since then moved across the street. But it was the original farmhouse of that farm back in the 1800s. And so as that time went on, it is the farmhouse, and then or was the farmhouse early, and because of that, we purchased the house.
After Ralph died, what happened? What did you guys decide to do with the house and the museum? Don't worry about it.
The house became a family corporation, and the most interested portions of the family maintained it as a museum for the old house and a museum for the radios, and we attempted to supply a ongoing source of different radio clubs, the AWA in particular, and they would come semi-annually or annually with groups of people, which I would get involved with because I understood the extent of the radio collection and what Ralph was doing and why he did it. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to help them through the museum, although I found early on that they knew a whole lot more about the radios I was pointing out to them than I knew about them. But they accepted me and I accepted them, and it worked out very nicely. And we had many nice tours that were I enjoyed very much. I got to know a few people from the AWA, and they, good people with a good prospect of, maintaining the history of radio and maintaining this as a museum.
Mm-hmm. Then what happened after that?
It just
over time there. The museum was closed. This was all closed down, right?
Yes. When my mom died in 2018,
okay, She was still living here at the time.
She lived on here and took care of the radio museum and had it cleaned and dusted and
Right.
The family corporation changed gears and decided to rent the entire house rather than maintain it as a family vacation spot. And its functionality as a radio museum diminished because of the need for people to be for its availability for rental, along with its availability as a museum for the old house. It's that availability for that to be toured and
kept
appreciated.
Limited available hours. So their idea, so they put a lot of money into renovating this place, and they wanted to rent it out as a source of income to maintain the property. Was that the idea?
That was the whole idea, yes.
Okay. And Ralph had left a sum of money to keep the place up.
Correct.
Kind of a trust to maintain the place. And they spent the money from the trust to restore it, to rent it out.
Right.
Okay, and when they tried to rent it out, what happened?
Well, as it turns out, we're on the end of Long Island. People come here to vacation for a couple of reasons: to be away from the city, to be near the water so they can go fishing, to be swimming and do all those things and enjoy those things, those aspects that this area provides.
Right.
And this house, unfortunately, is on a main road near a swamp that has many, I shouldn't say a swamp, wetlands that has a mosquito population that is overwhelming at times. And we do not have a swimming pool. We do not have the attributes that people actually...
Not a kid-friendly kind of property.
If
you got kids, this is not the kind of place you bring them to.
Right. And it has no easy access to any of the amenities that this community offers. So we just didn't have a good outcome from our efforts to rent the house.
Okay, so you tried renting it for a while. That didn't work. Then everything was just closed up, pretty much, or...
Well, we continue to try to rent it, but unfortunately, it is a wooden structure. It does not present as being a modern house, other than it has air conditioning and it's comfortable to be in. It is a wooden structure, and it has these two very large areas that are unusable for rental, meaning the Old House Museum and the Radio Museum. And so the insurance was very high, and between the insurance and the utility bills and the taxes, ate through our funds quite rapidly.
Okay, so a decision was made to try to sell the place.
Yes, we got down to the point where the overall bills were going to last us. We're going to be spent.
The trust money was going to be tapped out, basically.
It was going to be tapped out in about 2 years, and I for one said, let's not wait until we're broke to sell the house.
Right.
We should find somebody that's capable of appreciating what's here, whether they keep the Radio Museum and keep the museum, the Old House Museum, functional. They still have to accept that those are parts of what is here for sale, and the market for that person is pretty small. It's an expensive house, and its upkeep is expensive, and accepting the care of a historic property and a historic museum of radios kind of is a small
few buyers that
few
fit
buyers
that profile
that fit that person out, that right fit that profile.
Okay, so you've had it up on the market for what, a few months now?
About 6 months.
About 6 months, and just a few lookers. No, nothing serious.
Right.
Well, I hope that changes. I hope you find the right person for this place. And
oh, I do too.
And 'cause it's a beautiful place, and like you say, the history. I've gone through and videotaped the old main part of the house and the museum and the add-ons. Tell us about what you know about the history of the house itself. Now, you talked to me about when we were going through it, some Coopers, the oak barrel builders, and things like that.
Originally, there was 7 houses of the type that the old house consists of. Mm-hmm. A post and girt, barn board,
original structure,
type structure. Mm-hmm. And the Queen of England had 7 of those down the north end of Long Island built. Mm-hmm. And they were large houses to house the Coopers and the lumberjacks and the maintenance of those people, and that idea to farm the oak forest that was here, cut the wood and turn it into barrels, ship those barrels to Jamaica or wherever they could fill them with rum or whatever, mm-hmm. and then that would go back to England, and then it would come back to get more, and those people had to live somewhere. So this house was a fairly large house because it was somewhat of a dormitory for those people to live in, so that they could do those jobs.
So this was one of the original 7.
One of the original
and
7.
The Queen of England?
Yeah. Yes.
At that time, who was the Queen of England back in 16?
I'm not sure. I'm sure.
I'll look that up.
Okay.
I'll look that up. Hey, Greg, we got a timeline of the house's history. So why don't you read it to us, and we have a little more information on the history of the house.
Okay. And according to this timeline, in 1639, Matthew Sutherland owned this property. In 1672, the property was purchased by a Mr. Thomas Terry II.
Okay.
Who is a direct descendant or a direct ancestor of my mother.
Okay.
In 1776, Colonel Thomas Terry, that owned the house at that point, dies in Connecticut. Mm-hmm. The property was then sold to a Mr. Helms, who I'm assuming owned the house until 1805, when Elisha Mulford and of East Hampton purchased the property.
Okay.
We actually have headstones in the yard, which are now benches that used to be headstones, but his family was put on a monument in Orient. And so the headstones were removed, and the house, they were remembered on the monument, and these became benches. The reason they became benches is because when we purchased the house, we had to restore the chimney, and the hearthstones on 2 of the fireplaces were large stones that, when we lifted them out, they were face down headstones of both Elisha and Damaris Mulford.
Oh, wow. So you had no idea.
We had no idea that's what they were until we lifted them out in the process of the restoration.
Oh, that's amazing.
Then in 1846, Benjamin K. Mulford, also an ancestor of my mom, builds onto the house and adds adds the house we sit in right now, which was a small farmhouse, as an addition to the old house.
Okay.
And it became the farmhouse of a farm at that point.
Okay.
The house and the property was purchased by Henry Heath in 1901, the doctor I previously mentioned. And Dr. Heath adds a new portion to the which we call the big house, which was a large structure with the ballroom, which became the
museum.
The museum, and a kitchen, which the house didn't previously have, and three bedrooms above that, where the family actually lived.
Okay.
And Henry Heath adds all these things were added in 2000. I'm sorry, all these things were added in 1910.
Okay.
In 1979, Ralph Williams and my mom, Elinor, purchased the house and 6 acres of land.
Okay, so 15 acres north of the house was given to Nature Conservatory. The remainder of the property divided and sold for homes abutting the Sound.
Right.
Okay, and then in 2000, the Williams family reconfigures the rear portion of the big house to accommodate the downstairs bedroom and bath. Okay, so there's been quite a few changes over the years. So your family's names is on the house, Terry Mulford.
Correct.
Okay. Now,
and actually, before the house was given up to the Heath family,
mm-hmm.
I know her great grandmother lived here, so that had to be a Mulford back before Dr. Heath took over.
Okay.
And that's when it was in those years previous to that, it was a farmhouse, and there was a barn at the other end of the property, and it was the central, the farmhouse and barn of the Mulford farm.
Right.
Which then became the Latham farm and moved across the street.
Okay. So that's pretty amazing that this house originally is in your family, is sold, and then comes back in your family.
Right.
And does it bother you a little bit now having to sell it, to have to let it go out of the family?
Bothers me a lot. When we purchased the house, it was in tremendous disarray. It had been vacant for probably 15 or 20 years,
mm-hmm.
and the animals had taken over. We had to strip the house completely of all its walls interiorly and redo them. We had to raise the old house, put a new foundation under it, and completely restore the chimney. And in the ballroom, we had to again strip out the walls and restore continuity because of animal damage and just age.
Right. So, okay. Well, it's a great history, amazing history of the house. I'm sorry you have to sell it. I'm glad you invited me out here so I could see it before it was gone in the museum. But the museum will live on in video. You'll still be able to see it. And we'll have it on the internet. A lot of other people will see it.
Hopefully, whoever buys it is interested in radios or interested in history and maintains the museum.
That would be great.
That would be the ideal situation.
That would be great. I'd love to come back if the new owners, you find the right owners, and I hope you do, and see it again. Because it's like I told you earlier when I was going through it, I cut my teeth on radio collecting with the Atwater Kent, and it's like a kid in a candy store going through that museum and seeing all those great radios. A lot of those types I've done a lot of work on, especially the breadboards.
Mm-hmm.
I'm restoring them, and I really enjoyed it. And I have a an Atwater Kent Model 5. The story's on my Roaring Twenties Antique Radio Museum site that your stepfather, Ralph Williams, came out to a college in California to give a talk on early radio, and a gentleman out there had found an Atwater Kent 5 in the back of a radio shop in the late 60s, and he bought it from the radio shop owner. And when Ralph came into town, he brought this Atwater Kent 5, which was in kind of rough shape, to the university where Ralph was speaking. And he got to talk to Ralph, and he asked him if he could restore it. And Ralph said, sure. And this gentleman's name was Prater, and he gave Ralph the radio, and a few weeks back he got it fully restored, and a book, his book, Ralph's book, signed by Ralph. And it's beautiful, and I am so glad to have that sitting in my little museum in my basement, kind of a mini version of the Atwater Kent Museum. But yeah, so this is great to be able to meet you, and it's kind of a small world, the way things work out, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's amazing how things.
I never thought I would meet you and your family when I bought that radio. I was thrilled to have it.
Sure.
And now I'm here, so it's just an amazing turn of events, which I'm very glad for. Can I, on a personal level, I don't know if you want to talk about this or not, I just learned from Joni about your sister.
Yes.
And 9/11.
Correct.
Do you not want to talk about that?
My sister Catherine, she was 4 years older than I, worked for Marsh McClellan on the 93rd floor of the
World Trade Center.
World Trade Center Building 1. And so when it was destroyed by the first airline that hit, we feel that she was just 2 floors above that, probably the explosion of that aircraft took out her office and her cohorts that were working that day. Fortunately, she was the vice president of Internet Facilities, and the people that worked for her had worked till midnight the night before developing a new program, and they were instituting that program the morning of 9/11, and there was no reason for them to come back in after working late the night before. So about 80-90% of her crew were at home and watched this all happen instead of being at work like they normally would be, and their lives were saved because they didn't go to work that day. So it was really a strange twist of fate, but a good thing for those people. And
I'm very sorry to hear about that. I'm sure that was a huge shock, and it's just I don't know. Do you ever get over something like that? I can't imagine.
No, you don't. It's. I think you lose somebody like that. It takes a lot of time out of your life because there's so many blanks. There's so many unanswered questions, and we assume she died instantly. We don't even know where she was there. She could have gone up to the restaurant on the top of that building and walked around with them till the building fell down, like so many poor people who just were there and knew that they were doomed and had no way out.
Right.
Or she may have been in her office and died instantly. We're hoping for the latter.
Yeah, I hope so too. Well, yeah, that kind of threw me. Joni told me that. Yeah, I didn't expect that. So are you doing okay now?
I'm doing great.
And Joni, your wife, and you seem like a great couple.
We're very happy. We live in Pennsylvania, and we have a house there, and we've always come out here when we can, and we're here today for a memorial for my other sister who died of cancer just a year ago, and her wishes were that she be memorialized with her favorite cousins who all live in this area, and so we got together and had a memorial for her today.
All right. Anything else you care to tell us? Anything we've missed?
I don't think so. I think we covered it pretty well. It's a great house. Its history is tremendous.
What do you ask? Is it okay to tell them what you're asking for the?
I believe the going price is $2.5 million right now, and again, it's a 22-room house. It's a lot of floor space.
How many square feet do you know total?
I do not know offhand.
Okay. All right. Well, if you're a radio fan or a fan of history, this would be a great house to own. You'll need some deep pockets, but it's a beautiful property, as you've already seen in my video. And hopefully somebody out there will see this and tell somebody. If they're not interested, tell somebody who might be. Somebody who will keep this place intact and keep the museum open and let other people share in the history of Atwater Kent. Greg, thanks for inviting me out here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
This has been a real treat for me.
Well, it's been a treat for you to come and visit us and do this. I thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, that's it for this interview, and we'll be back with future interviews on the Roaring Twenties radio channel. So we hope to see you again soon here. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, that's it for this video. There'll be more to come as we continue to investigate the early history of the world's first true mass medium, radio. Thanks for watching.